Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena gratitam purana munina madhye mahabharatam Advaita amrita varshinim bhagavatim ashtadasha adhyayinim ambatvam anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshinim. O Mother, Bhagavad Gita, I repeatedly meditate on you, who are the 18 chapters in the middle of the Mahabharata, composed by the ancient sage Vyasa, taught for the benefit of Partha, you and I, by the Lord Narayana himself, the goddess, the shower of the nectar of Advaitam, the enemy of rebirth. So we are on the last two values. And value 19 was commitment to self-knowledge. And it consisted of, firstly, intimately getting to know, very personal, the three goals of life, and that is security, various forms of delights in life, and nobility. So once we get to know the limits of these three goals, then we are ready to pursue the fourth goal, which is the goal which is least popular. The whole world is about three goals, the first three goals. Artha, Kama, Dharma. The fourth goal only comes after intimately knowing, what is the limits of just pursuing security and more money and more success and more delights, even though nothing's wrong with it. But then again, the person comes to a point and says, okay, let's move on. It's time to move on now. So everyone comes to this point at some lifetime or another. And then the fourth goal grabs you and there's no going back. The person cannot go back now into the former three because you realize, owing to your education, the limits of the former three. Once the person starts to pursue moksha, it's literally impossible to go back because the knowledge slowly pulls you in. It points out the limits of the former three and your nature, and then who wants to go back into a small person. The value 19 also consisted of the three pillars. Remember that? And then value 20, see, once having understood this fourth pursuit, then you now ask the question, well, what is the means to this fourth pursuit? And this is where value 20 comes, understanding the validity of self-knowledge. So this is whereby I now know what role the scriptures play in relation to the fourth goal, which I have come to understand in value 19. Because it's one thing to understand, okay, I need moksha, but then what? Right? What's the next step? Then I go, okay, so what is that means by which I can actually pursue this? And therefore the scriptures comes into the picture. So what are the scriptures? The scriptures are like a compass that show us how to navigate this world of apparent differences, of duality. Like, how do I make the best decision? How do I make an intelligent decision? How do I make a decision that leads to least possible disturbances in the future? These are the questions that are prevalent in everyone's mind, pertinent to the situations that we are finding ourselves within. The scriptures, furthermore, than just talking about the ins and outs of how to make a best possible decision and navigate our world, literally. It also talks about what is the truth of the entire world. What is the reality, the existence that connects the interconnected web behind all creation, behind all appearances. What is the one common thread? Just like a mala, one thread connects the many, many beads. Those beads appear independent. However, they only appear to be independent in relation to the thread that is all holding them together. So not only are they interdependent, but they're also connected to or dependent upon the one common unifying reality, which we're going to talk about in verse 12 and 18, called Brahman. We also said that the scriptural texts cannot be contradicted, even though they will be contradicted by a novice mind, because a novice mind is not trained to look into the depth of things. The novice mind reads a statement and goes, that's wrong. But an advanced mind, a clear mind, is able to look beyond the statement and say, what is it really talking about? What is behind the words? What is it trying to tell me? Example, I really like the way that you are treating the kids. But behind those words, what do you actually mean? I hope that this matter is brought to your attention because something needs to be looked into. So in other words, you're looking one step behind the words. In the jungle, there's a long insect. They're called phasmids. Why would an insect be long that looks like a stick in a jungle?
To hide itself.
To hide itself. In other words, to camouflage itself. Now, does the insect tell you, hey, I'm long because I want to camouflage myself? No. All you saw was the length of an insect. And by that, you inferred there must be a connection, a reason behind this. So you looked beyond just the length. The length is the gross matter, but you look beyond that matter of the gross. And therefore, you inferred in relation to the predators, then the insect has thus through the course of time made itself to be camouflaged that looks like a stick, therefore increasing its chance of survival. What about another example? A sea turtle lays approximately 100 plus eggs on the beach, and then it covers it, a little concave shape on the sand. Why do you think it lays so many eggs? Why do you need so many children, 100 children? And you look up and you see seagulls. Now the question is, why does a turtle lay so many eggs?
Increase the chances of survival.
Exactly, because the moment those turtles hatch, then where they're off to? They're straight off to the ocean, predators, above seagulls, predators. Now, did anyone tell you this? No. You infer this through the connection between the predators, the distance between where the nest is and how much it has to walk to the beach. That's also a chance that a seagull might catch it and fly away. All of these variables you saw behind the obvious. The obvious was the eggs, but there's much more there. So the scriptures are like this. You always look behind the lines, and the teacher's job is to provide the depth behind what the scriptures are saying. Then we talked about, we're still on value 20, the three processes of how Vedanta works. And the first process, C, is, in fact, it's a process that works anywhere. And how do you learn anything? Suppose you want to take a physics class, or you listen to the instructor. When we listen, what do we need to do? We need to temporarily put aside our notion, which says this, quote, I heard this before, and I liked or I didn't like what I heard, close quote. That notion sabotages the individual. Because no doubt many notions, even in Vedanta, you've heard before, you've read before. But what does the brain say? Yep, I've heard this before, and I really liked what it said, or I didn't like what it said. And then the moment a mind says this, the teaching has stopped for that mind. Therefore, from then on, the person is just opening their mouth, but nothing's going in. So therefore, temporarily suspend that notion, which the mind loves to fall into due to comfort zone, the path of least resistance, and look at it or listen to it through the fresh eyes, as if a beginner's mind. And this is what keeps the person constantly growing and growing and growing nonstop. The moment you say, I've heard this before, that's when the learning slowly starts. That kind of attitude starts to spill over into everything else. So it's not just like you're saying that in one class and it's not true over there. No, there's always this carryover that happens behind the scenes in the background. Then Mananam. Having heard by the teacher or the book or the course, now what happens? You've got a lot of doubts, a lot of notions that aren't really aligned to what you've heard before. This is normal in any course, in any subject matter. We have conflicts, and then we need to resolve these conflicts and these doubts. And this is what Mananam is, whereby we voice out, in reference to Vedanta, our doubts, our notions which we are unable to resolve. That means contradictions in our minds. We need to voice that out. For example, we spoke about the Mahavakyas last week. Suppose there's a question like, I don't quite understand how I am the wave, and the ocean is the Ishvara, and the water is the final substratum that underlies in and through everything, both the ocean and the wave. How do I fit in that? What's my role in that picture? How do I now bring that into reality, into practical day-to-day living? How do I apply that? That's a question that you bring up. What is Mananam?
Resolving contradictions.
Super 100%. In Mananam, we clear these contradictions, and there's three types of contradictions. Your own contradictions or doubts, no doubt, this is your own first. The second is others' contradictions or doubts. Because sometimes our own classmates bring up objections and we go, wow, I never thought of that. I really want to hear what the teacher has to say about that, because this is really applicable to me now. So first yours, second classmates, and also to go beyond one step more, then you need to start to look at the doubts of other competing schools. So if you really want to go deeper into Vedantic philosophy and philosophy in general, then you go and see what other schools of thought are saying, because they have some brilliant logics that a person has to find a way to still hold their existing notions about the school that they're from. So this is where then Buddhism will come, and Nyaya will come, and Jainism will come, and Vishishta Advaita will come, and then they will start to bring and will try to trip over Vedantic views, and then Vedanta has to then debate and therefore to establish its view as non-contradictory. So for example, let's take Purva Mimamsa. Now Purva Mimamsa, okay, Vedas 2 sections, Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda is associated to Purva Mimamsa. In other words, let's perform rituals here while alive, so that at some future point in time, we may attain, in this case, moksha, liberation. In other words, every point of resolution or every point of being in this world is for the sake of some future benefit at some time over there, maybe a different loka, maybe a heaven, maybe Brahma loka, wherever it is. So this is how Purva Mimamsa school will look at it in form of what is moksha, going to a better place in the future after death. How about Vishishta Advaita? Vishishta Advaita. This is whereby the school stops at the ocean. In other words, they don't bring in Brahman, they don't bring in the water, as we spoke last week. And they say that you, the wave, are part of Ishvara, just like the wave is part of the ocean. And when you understand that you are actually not part of Ishvara, that you are one with Ishvara, then what happens upon the Videha Mukti, that means after the person dies, having understood this notion, then you go to Vaikuntha. That means a special place, a brilliant place, and you're there with Ishvara forever. You're there with God forever. In fact, this is synonymous sometimes even with some Christian beliefs, whereby I get to go to heaven and sport with God, be under his lap, under his protection after I die, assuming I've understood that I am not different from God. So this is still a notion of duality there. So in other words, it still take you very far, but you still have to complete the journey. And this is where Vedanta, Advaita will then come and do that. For example, remember chapter 11, when Arjuna saw Vishvarupa, when he was being shown by Krishna the bright side and the dark side of the total reality. And then Arjuna got afraid because he couldn't handle the darker side of reality. So that reality is Vishvarupa, that is God's reality. So this is what the Vishishta Advaitas will pursue. I want that reality. I want to be part of that, with God at one with God, even though I'm still separate. I'm not God itself, but I'm one with God. So there's a slight distinction there. I'm not entirely God, but I'm one with God. Then we have Dvaitans. Now, Dvaitans are very interesting. They are quite loud sometimes in trying to trip over Vedanta. Their mindset is, I want to be reborn over and over again for two reasons. Either so I can sport with Krishna, I can be his devotee, pleasing him. Sounds very moving. It is moving, actually. In fact, it's very healthy too, because it's highly, highly devotional. For example, the school ISKCON, you may have heard of ISKCON, they will follow this path, highly devotional, and it's very inspirational because whoever comes to ISKCON, basically, God becomes the center of the world and they become extremely devotional. However, the concept of moksha there is, I will be reborn, if not here, so that I can spend time pleasing Krishna and devoting and singing his glories and chanting, then at least at some point in the future in heaven, I can sport with Krishna in Vaikuntha, for example. We've also heard these notions in Western philosophy or Western religions. This Dvaitam is the essence of most religions today. That means duality. I am small, I am separate from the being that is at some point, at somewhere, at some place. And therefore, I want to now accomplish that being. I want to be at one with that being. Is Advaita a waste of time?
It's not a waste of time. It acts as a It puts you on the path.
Good. Yeah, exactly. In other words, every path suits a certain mindset. A mindset that is still beginning, it's not going to have the subtlety in order to appreciate Brahman. In other words, it needs something more gross. It needs to continue with its notion, me and that. That's the general state of the gross mind. I and you, and I want you. Just like a relationship, I need you. In other words, I need God for my happiness. So in other words, you simply create a school that appeals to that kind of mindset, because that mindset is the maximum that is capable of grasping. Therefore, you provide that. This is why, again, no school deserves criticism, because every school is there only to serve the many minds throughout our life. And this is where the beauty of appreciating the whole comes, is you no longer have the need to opinionate or to put down other schools how they don't know, ignorant. This is not the case anymore, but rather see the beauty, the part that they play in bringing both you and I too was Advaitin at some point, at some lifetime, if not this one, at some other lifetime, who because of their devotion and because of their guidance has brought you and I to this place. And what is that place? The culmination after all of the Advaita has been performed and all of the chanting and all of the rituals and all of the prayers have been said and done. What is the culmination of that in many, many lifetimes? The culmination is Advaita. Therefore, to come to Advaita, you need lots and lots of grace. And not only that, but you need even more grace to stay in Advaita, because some people come to Advaita just out of curiosity and they go, well, actually Advaita sounds better because at least I can relate to some being who I am to love. And therefore that sounds more close to my reality of living in this world. Therefore, that's what I'm going to pursue. So you need lots of grace to finally come to that path, knowing which, and once ascertained, all other paths automatically are reconciled. No more do I have a need to compare other paths, but you simply see, as though looking through everything, the transparency and the interconnectedness and the purpose of every path that has ultimately put you to a place of no longer needing to seek any further, no longer doubting your position and relationship in respect to everything else in existence. So therefore, to come to Advaita is the final culmination of Advaita, which took lifetimes of pursuit and seeking and going left and right, and sometimes being tricked here and there. But ultimately, you come to this path. So again, this is not something now to go, oh, I'm so proud to be an Advaitin. It's got nothing to do with that. Rather, just see, this is just simply pointing out the facts. When a person points out the facts, there's no space for pride or this or that. It's just, okay, great. I see it. Let's move on. So in other words, you remain an inquirer rather than buying another notion and adding more kind of pride onto the Ahamkara. It's got nothing to do with that with Advaita. Considering there are many schools in Indian philosophy, how do you know who is interpreting the Upanishads correctly? Is it the Vishishta Advaitins? Is it the Advaitins? Is it the Purva Mimamsikas? How do you know which one, or Advaita Vedantins, how do you know which one is interpreting the Upanishads, the source from which they're drawing from, or the Vedas? How do you know which one is interpreting them correctly? Question for you.
You check with your own experience.
You verify with your own experience, right? And through inquiry in the process of trying to relate to what they're saying and then comparing it to what is my experience in relation to what they're saying. Well, any other ideas?
All the paths lead to the same goal.
All paths serve you to come to a subtle mind whereby it's able to appreciate the total reality. So therefore, you have to come to the knowledge ultimately.
There's also an inner logical understanding what exactly they're saying, and is there some validity in it?
Okay, the problem with that is you're depending now on your own view. See, so that can become now self-righteousness, but that is a possibility. That means you need logic. But how do you come to a point of, because see, there's many schools and they all seem to be saying the right thing. They're all very convincing. How do you know which one's the closest to or the truest to what the Upanishads or the Vedas are really trying to communicate?
You use the discriminative faculty of the Buddhi after studying the Shastra for length of time to understand the truth that it's revealing to you.
I would say it goes beyond matter. You're looking at the infinite rather than the finite, and you're sort of reducing it or negating it back to the basic infinite truth, I think. So it's all like...
Yeah, but thing is, see, now someone can say the infinite truth is Vaikuntha, and someone says the infinite truth is Brahman. So how do you know which one's saying the truth now?
Because things are impermanent. Most things are impermanent, and you look at the things that are permanent, like finite, infinite to finite.
Sure.
So
Okay,
that's
we're getting there.
one of mine.
So we're talking now from a standpoint of just Vedanta, but what about the Vishishtadvaita? What about Advaita, who's not going to agree with what Lorena said? See, for example, Chavarka or Advaita will say that no, matter is real, but now in Vedanta we say matter is apparent.
Yeah, you look for the truths that are non-negatable. I mean, you can negate a statement that matter is real, because it's always analysable and resolvable into something else. But the statements of the Shastra are not negatable by any other means of knowledge.
Could it be because in Advaita, their arguments are pretty, the contentions are consistent. So when you debate against them, you can't cut them down. Whereas with other schools, you can find fault with them and then make them reflect on them. They can't argue back. So Advaita stood the test of time. It has been debated relentlessly, but it's still been able to argue for itself. Yeah,
okay, now Nagesh is pointing out the most accurate answer. So there is a process called analysis, mimamsa. And analysis involves engaging with other scholarly people. Why? Because you have to defend what you are saying against what they are saying, instead of saying I'm right. That's the easiest way. No, I'm right. Advaita is right. If you say I am right, you're not an Advaitin, right? Much more to learn. In other words, you engage with those opposing schools, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, and you say, what do you have to say about Brahman, about Ishvara? And then we'll say, no, that is not, it cannot be real because, and then we'll give you an argument. And then you have to use all of your knowledge that you have learned, and then you have to find a counter to what they said. Now, whoever is capturing the Upanishads most correctly, that view, having gone through scholarly debates, cannot be contradicted any further. Because if a person is adding their own personal spin through the course of time, as Nagesh just said, that view will eventually falter. A logical fallacy will be revealed in that view as soon as someone with a more sophisticated version of thinking comes over and says, I can actually debate and make you wrong. I can break down your theory. Now, if you cannot sustain that, if you do not have a counter to that, then your school no longer measures up. So this final school that cannot be broken down, no matter how many debates attack it, is the one that, as Nagesh said, stands the test of time. Therefore, it is non-contradictable. Thus, it is the most accurate view to the truth, because truth is one. Truth has no errors. Truth has no faults. Truth has no holes. Therefore, the view that has no holes, no errors, cannot be negated by any other seeming truth, is the one that has sustained the closest to the truth, to the absolute truth. So this is the beauty of the Vedas. They're highly logical and even debatable in nature, instead of relying on mere faith or just these, people out there. And then you say, well, how do I verify that? Tell me, show me. Like, I'm a human being here, but how do I relate that right here and right now? Okay.
Isn't that what Shankaracharya did? He went around and he debated with everybody.
Exactly. And that's
all the different schools.
And that's effort. That's a lot of thinking, and you're willing to be vulnerable, to expose yourself out there to other sophisticated scholars. It's so easy today to just buy into a view and go, okay, now let me sit down and let me just revel in my view as it's correct. But the moment a person comes out, right, and they get challenged, and that doesn't feel good at all. So if you can gladly go out into a competing schools and still willing to debate, then you are really firm in what you know, in your school of knowledge. That's where your thinking, your grasp of reality just skyrockets if you're able to sustain the test of time with other sophisticated and highly respectable scholars coming from different schools. Then comes Nididhyasanam. Now, what is Nididhyasanam? Nididhyasanam, just like after finishing school and you get a degree, what do? Do you just stop there? No. That's when your work has actually begun. Nididhyasana means having gone through the work, being taught, removing doubts, then what? Use that and I relate it to real life. So I start to contemplate my day-to-day experience in relation to what I've learned in Shravanam and the results and the doubts being resolved in Mananam. So why is Nididhyasana required in reference to Vedanta? Because for beginningless time, how has the Jiva taught? I am an individual. And as an individual, a small individual, apart from you and the world and everything else, how do I get happy? By getting stuff. So this is what we are all born with. In fact, who gets born and goes, no, mommy, I don't want anything, you know, just give me basics of the basics. Just need some milk and that's about it. No. In other words, to be born is to get stuff. That is the common denominator at just being born. I want stuff. Why else would you come to earth than to think that you're an apart individual who doesn't have it? Therefore, to get it, what do I need to do? Get born and therefore work to attain it. So therefore, I'm a doer and an enjoyer. So I get born as a doer enjoyer, and that is the reality commonly agreed across the globe. It's normal. Question is now, having come to the end of the 20 values, you ask, knowing what I now know about these 20 values, how can I incorporate them in my thoughts or my words or my behaviors? What are the ways? What are 5 ways that I can incorporate them? And where will I incorporate them? And when will I actually apply them? So you go through the 20 values, the weakest one, the one you feel that needs work on, commit to that specific goal, make that goal be, or that value be your friend for the next 30 days, and just attempt to live life for the next 30 days with that friend by your side. That means as though a filter, looking at the world, perceiving the world through this one value that you have selected for at least 30 days. And this is where the real work comes. It's easy to talk 20 values and say, wow, sounds all interesting. Next Tuesday, we'll see you. But rather, the work will, to actually shine this, one has to apply it. How to apply it? Simple. When you're confronted or not confronted, or just in a normal day-to-day situation, you ask yourself, how do I respond to this? I don't know. Okay, then pause. First step, pause. Step 2, bring in the values, one of the 20 values. If you don't have them in your head, then to pull it out on your phone, right? Oh, excuse me, before we debate, let me just get my phone. Let me look up. Okay, values. Okay, good. Where were we? Anything. I literally did this for many years because I knew that once you're out there, once you're with a person, too late. Forget about values coming back. It's just your old self comes back. So the greatest thing that you can do, one of the greatest tips is have this associated to you wherever you go. How do you do that, right? Okay, here's a little question for you. What happens the moment we leave our door? Our room where we do all our studies, the studies along with the room stay in the room. In other words, the studies in the room are in one place, but the person walks out with their old style, with their old self, and they only come back into their role of the educated person when they enter the room. So now the question is, what if you could take your room with you wherever you go? What if you could take those associations in that study room of yours? This is why, by the way, it's healthy to have a study room that you study only in one room and not study all over the place. Because whatever you study in one room, what happens? You have associations to that room. So that room becomes to you a world of knowledge. So the question is, how do you carry that room with you wherever you go? So this is where prayers come in. You can say, for example, may all of the associations that I have in this place, in my library of knowledge, may these associations follow me wherever I go. May these associations become my entire world. May this mind, wherever it happens to go, may this mind always be associated and connected, established in the knowledge, no different than it's established right here, right now, in this room, where otherwise it is thinking sharp and thinking clear. So may this clarity follow me wherever. So this is where prayers come handy, because you're asking for what would really actually help you. Who wouldn't want to have all of the associations follow them wherever they go? So pause, remember, and then apply based on what you have remembered. And then act. So this is how to apply these 20 values. So value 19, revision, is tattva jnanartha darshanam, commitment to self-knowledge. Value 20 is adhyatma jnana nityatvam, understanding the validity of self-knowledge. And this concludes our 20 values. Verse 12, what is to be known? Jnaya. Jnayam yatat pravakshyami yat jnatvam rtam ashnute anadim mat param brahma Na Sat and Asat uchyate.
What is to be known that I will tell clearly, knowing which one gains deathlessness. That is said to be Brahman, which has no beginning, is limitless, and is neither existent as an object nor non-existent.
Continue.
Gyeya, what is to be known is Brahman, although any object to be known is called Gyeya in the context and also from the standpoint of what is really to be known and what is really can be known. Gyeya here is Brahman. That Bhagwan says, I will tell you clearly. There are varieties of things to be known in this world, but knowing this, one gains deathlessness, amritam ashnute. This restricts the meaning of Gyeya to Brahman. Deathlessness here means not just freedom from death, but also freedom from the cycle of birth and death. Though this body will die, there will be no rebirth and consequently no death. Only the one who dies can be reborn, but the one who is eternal, the Atma, will not die. If knowing this, there is a freedom from birth and death, what is known, Gyeya must be beyond the scope of time, eternal. But if you know an eternal other than yourself, how will you be free from death? By knowing something eternal, you do not become eternal. If by knowing something you are to gain deathlessness, that something can only be yourself. Atma happens to be eternal, and knowing that, you discover that you are eternal. The difficulty here is that the one thing everybody knows is Atma. There is no need to consult anybody about your whereabouts or your existence. But what you know about yourself is the opposite of what is said here. You know yourself as mortal. You do not seek the help of the Shastra to establish that you exist, as you do to help you establish whether there is a heaven. Shastra just establishes that Atma alone is eternal. In the next line, he says how Atma is eternal, that is free from death, Amrit. What is Gyeya is Anadi Mat. It has no beginning. What has no beginning need not have no end, but here it is para, limitless, and therefore without end also. This is absolutely free from time. In other words, eternal. That Brahma is to be known as Atma. Brahman is neither Sat nor Asat. It is myself. And this Param Brahma, he tells us further, is na Sat, not an existent thing, and Tat na Asat, nor non-existent.
We will do a quick revision. Krishna so far has completed 3 words. The first one is kshetram. This is the world. The second one is kshetrajna. This is the awareness that is shining through the subtle, the gross, and the causal body. In other words, Atma. And third is jnanam. These are the 20 values that we have just finished. Now Krishna is entering. In fact, Krishna will cover 3 more topics. There are jneyam, which is verse 12 to 18 that we're about to embark on, prakriti, and purushaha. So let's start with jneyam. What is jneyam? The verse says, yat tat pravakshyami. So this amida means something I have to do. That which I have to know. That which is to be known by me, by the individual. How? By first ascertaining the 20 values. That is why verse 12 comes after verse 7 and 11. So this means once we've gone through the 20 values and qualified the mind, made it sensitive enough to understand the nature of the I, the most subtlest of the subtlest topic in existence, only then we can now state Jneyam is that which is to be known by you, assuming you have successfully undergone sufficiently these 20 values. In other words, Jneyam is also a synonym for kshetrajna. And I just said kshetrajna is awareness shining through the stula, sukshma, and karana sharira, the subtle, gross, and the causal body. Now, what specifically is to be known? The verse said, Brahman. Brahman means, I will define Brahman a lot more in verse 14. We're only now in verse 12. Brahman means consciousness for now. When I say consciousness, this word consciousness has two meanings. If we don't know those two meanings, then we will always wonder what consciousness are you talking about. The first consciousness is the empirical state consciousness. This relates to your state of mind, the psychological, physiological state of mind. For example, you look at the very popular book called The Flow, How to Get into an Optimal State of Experience. What does the flow talk about? All about changing your consciousness, improving your consciousness. You go into many programs today about self-help and psychology. What would they talk about? They will use this word awareness and consciousness very often, referring to what?
The mind, matter.
It's the state of mind generally, just how you feel, the alertness, like be very conscious. In other words, are you aware of the fact that you are late today? Are we now bringing philosophical matter awareness? No, we're just saying, is your mind alert to the fact that it failed to come at the appropriate time? Category 2 consciousness is absolute. That is the witness consciousness of category 1. So what is category 1? The state of mind, as Maureen was describing, the chatter, what's going on in the mind, the question, who is this I, what's this, what's that? All of this belongs to the realm of the mind. What is category number 2? That because of which category number 1 is experienced, is heard, is witnessed. In other words, the absolute witness consciousness. So Brahman refers to category 2 and not category 1. So I'm saying this why? Because this word consciousness so prevalent today. We need to first now find peace with it. So next time a science person says consciousness, you're not tripped over. You don't say, consciousness refers to Brahman. No, you need to respect his views because he's referring to category number 1. So it's completely acceptable. And then the verse says, Brahman is neither Sat nor Asat. So how do you know Brahman? By first answering what is Sat and Asat, because it says Brahman is not Sat and Asat. So first category, put Sat. Sat has SAT, has two meanings. Sat means existence. Now we're not talking about general existence of all that is, because also Sat Chit Ananda, that word Sat is describing Brahman. But here it says Brahman is not Sat. So when we say this Sat, it is not the Sat Chit Ananda. It is referring to an independent existence of an object. So you cannot point out and say, Brahman exists over there. In other words, Brahman is not an independent existence that can be pointed out or made into an object of knowledge. Okay, now I'm experiencing Brahman right now. Why? Because there is still an object of knowledge, of experience manifested within the mind. So the first Sat refers to effect. Effect means anything that is manifest. Is it not true when the seed grows into a tree? What do you call that tree? You call that tree the effect of what? The seed. The seed is the cause. Therefore, the tree is the manifest product, the effect. I see it. I point to it and I say tree. Bottle. In other words, this bottle is Sat. Tree is Sat. Anything that is an effect, that is a manifest product, is called Sat. The second definition of Sat means it's an object of knowledge. Suppose I have a pumpkin, I'm holding it in front of you. Pumpkin is evident as an existent object, as Sat. Therefore, that pumpkin is Sat because it is an object of knowledge made to the mind, but also it is an effect. It is a final product. It is manifest before me. So what are the two definitions of Sat, please, Gayatri?
One is the object of mind that's made to, to your awareness, and the other one is the effect, anything that manifests.
Good. So in other words, Sat in one summary is the effect, the final product. I see it. Then Asat. So Brahman is not Sat. Brahman is also not Asat. So what is Asat? Asat means, in one word, cause. So this Asat has two meanings. If Sat refers to is, so go back to your notes and put next to Sat is. So pumpkin is, in other words, pumpkin is Sat, evident. Asat refers to is not. Asat has two definitions. First one is unmanifest. Now, when you say unmanifest, it means it is absent. It is in causal potential state. For example, the seed is the cause, right? The seed is the cause of the tree. Where is the tree? Is it there? No. It's inside the seed. Well, if you look up the seed, is the seed inside is the tree inside the seed? No, it's not. What actually it is, because the seed is the blueprint for the Sat tree. Therefore, the seed being the cause is the Asat. So Asat is the unmanifest. In other words, that which is in causal or potential state. It hasn't manifested yet, but it will at some point in the future by variables coming together to manifest it so into Sat, into manifest. Boss is not in the office. In other words, boss is not. Therefore, boss is now Asat. Does that mean that boss doesn't exist at all? No, it just means on the basis of my observation, this which I'm pointing to, which I'm referring to, is not. In other words, we're still referring to that which is, but in this circumstance, it is not, because the variables, the conditions have changed. That means the boss came from the Sat version when he's pointing in front of us, and he goes into an Asat version, into an unmanifest, at least from our standpoint. It's not like he's absolutely gone unmanifest. Something more relatable, eating. Right now, there's an inherent tendency how you eat. When you take food, your jaw will be chewing that food a certain amount of times. A certain pressure of the jaw will be applied to chew that food. You will chew so many times, and even how you swallow, the strength of the swallowing is still also inherent in those tendencies. What you mix and what you put in your mouth, whether you have a glass of water next to you when you eat, that is also an inherent tendency. Whether you eat food without any drinks, that's also an inherent tendency. Everything about the way that you eat is what? Is it Sat or Asat?
I think it's Sat.
It cannot be Sat because right now you're not eating. So your tendency to eat is
Asat.
Asat, because it is in potential. It is a cause. It is a cause for how you are to eat. In other words, when I observe you and you like eating in a certain way, all over the place, so eating a very gentle, kind, civilized manner, that means I'm only now observing an effect of the cause. I'm observing the Sat of the Asat. The second definition of Asat is non-existent, completely non-existent. That means it's non-existent in the Vyavaharika world. You can still create it in your imagination. For example, how about pumpkin beard? Would you like a pumpkin beard? Don't know what you're talking about. Okay, sure. Then I'm going to go to a shop and I'm going to say, my wife wants to cook rabbit horns. Do you have any rabbit horns? Sir, we don't have rabbit horns. Oh, okay, sorry. Well, do you have sky flowers? I'm trying to impress her. Do you have sky flowers? Sir, we don't have sky flowers. What do you want? My kid wants a square circle. Do you have a square circle? So are you cuckoo? In other words, all of these square circle, pumpkin beard, rabbit horns, sky flowers, does such thing exist? You're going to say, yes, it does, because you just mentioned it. No, it only exists when you take two variables of the Vyavaharika transactional reality and you put it together in the mind. That's called pratibhasika. In other words, imagination. But it doesn't exist at the empirical level. So two definitions of Asat are, Robert?
That which is a manifest or in potential, and that which is completely non-existent. I think the last example, the square circle, doesn't really apply because you can't even imagine that. It's definitionally a contradiction.
Yeah, that's actually a slightly even a more closer to example to non-existent. You just cannot even imagine that. So sky flowers, at least we can kind of imagine that, sky flowers, but square circle, yeah.
If it's a cylinder and you turn it side on, it becomes square from a certain angle.
There's always a smart person, I tell you, who's going to.
You see that diagram too?
Very, very clever.
What is the verse saying? Brahman is neither Sat nor Asat. In other words, what is Brahman then? The presence which illumines both. For example, pumpkin, which is Sat. Pumpkin is evident as existent thing. Pumpkin is evident as an existent thing. Therefore, pumpkin is Sat. But also we say pumpkin's beard, or more like a square circle, is also known to be non-existent. In other words, Brahman illumines both the existent and the non-existent, both Sat and the Asat. Therefore, Brahman is neither. So both is and is not are evident to an independent reality that is not limited by the is and the is not. Is this clear? So this is and is not, it does not limit this reality called Brahman. Meena?
So in the last class, while discussing Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam, we said Brahman is Sat and Chit, existence and awareness. But now we are establishing the fact that Brahman is neither Sat nor Asat.
Yeah. Okay, good. Meena's got very sharp thinking. So as I said earlier on, so yes, Sat Chit Ananda, this Sat is also referring to truth, to reality, to existence. However, in this case, when I say Sat, Meena, I'm not referring to all existence. I'm referring to independent, like pumpkin existence or Brahman existence. Therefore, Brahman cannot be put into an independent object existence because Brahman is the existence of everything. Why is Brahman not Asat? And why is Brahman not Sat? Think about this.
It implies change because Sat is an effect, Asat is a causal state, then there's change, but Brahman doesn't change, it just is.
Okay, so your homework is to think, why is Brahman not Sat nor Asat? And then we will apply logic next week. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.